What's good, everybody? It's Robo back with another video, and today I'm breaking down my college football playoff bracket. Before I get started, I want to let you guys know my offseason content is going to be a wide variety of stuff. Starting off with my first NBA draft big board of the year coming out pretty soon. That's something I've done now for 2 years in this channel and I really enjoy. But on top of that, I'll have some NFL draft stuff as well as offseason college football content, of course. So again, stay tuned to the channel if any of that interests you. But that's it. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started with the picks, going in order of kickoff time as usual. Our first game of the 12-team playoff is Friday from Notre Dame, Indiana, as the Irish will host the Indiana Hoosiers. And I'm really glad we got this matchup as a 7-10 game because the in-state aspect should bring out a ton of Hoosier fans to South Bend. And as teams, I think this is going to be a really fun matchup. Indiana's rush defense is top 2 in the country in both total yards and yards per carry. And they'll be tasked with slowing down an Irish offense that is pretty run-heavy and one of the most effective rushing attacks in college football this season, going for 6.3 yards a pop and 225 yards a game. And one of the best backs in the entire country, Jeremiah Love, will be available and healthy for the Irish offense to help lead the way. But another factor of this offense is Riley Leonard. He's got over 700 rushing yards and 14 touchdowns on the year at quarterback, along with 2,000 yards passing, which is what has made this offense so special. As a group, Notre Dame sits right near Ohio State in total offense, with a different style of course, but maybe just as tough as an opponent as those Buckeyes were. And on the other side of the ball, Curtis Rourke has been incredible all year for the Hoosiers, throwing for over 9 yards per attempt and finishing as one of the better red zone passing quarterbacks in the country this season. But similar to the Irish offense, Rourke is going up against one of the best passing defense in the entire country. The Irish give up 158 passing yards per game, good for third best in the country, and that's another reason why I think this game could end up looking pretty similar to that Ohio State one. A closer final for sure in my opinion, but when that slips away from them as the game goes on, I just think this Notre Dame team has too much firepower on both sides of the ball for the Hoosiers to handle on the road. And because of that, I have the Irish taking this game 34-24. Saturday starts in Happy Valley with Penn State taking on SMU, and this is another great matchup between an elite run game and an elite run defense. Penn State averages over 200 yards a game on the ground and over 5 yards per carry as a team, but will have to face a Mustang defense giving up just 2.8 yards a carry and 93 total rushing yards a game so far. The strength of schedule gap is clear in this game, however, much more so than the Notre Dame-Indiana one, so we can take these statistics with a bit of a grain of salt because Penn State's had a much tougher road to this point. But this SMU team is still one of the best 10 or 15 in the country. Along with that run defense, their offense has been great all year with Kevin Jennings at quarterback. Over 6 yards of play overall and a balanced attack between the pass and the run with playmakers all over the field. This would be a tough task for the Nittany Lions defense to handle, but as a unit, Penn State's defense has been phenomenal themselves this year. Even including the Big Ten title against Oregon where they gave up 45 points, they still sit at top 10 in rushing yards a game allowed and top 20 against the pass. And as a defense, they've done a great job of limiting points all year. Teams have scored just 14 touchdowns and 30 red zone attempts against Penn State this year. A big reason why that per game point total sits at just 16 allowed. I think we may see the Penn State offense struggle here and there, but playing at home with that crowd is going to be able to force SMU into quite a few fourth down situations, which ends up helping them win this game. And I don't really expect this one to be too low scoring, so I'm going to go with a 30-23 final for Penn State and Happy Valley. 5 seed Texas gets the 12 seed Clemson Tigers in round 1. And it's a familiar quarterback matchup as Quinn Ewers and Cade Klubnik faced off in the Texas 6A state title back in 2021, with Klubnik and Westlake coming out on top in that game. This time they'll go head-to-head for a college football playoff quarterfinal spot, with the winner heading to Atlanta to take on the Arizona State Sun Devils in the Peach Bowl. This game has the highest spread of any of the round 1 games. It currently sits at 11.5 in favor of Texas, obviously. But I don't want to sleep on this Clemson team too much. A super hot start had them on the verge of absolutely dismantling SMU in the ACC title game and keeping them out of the playoffs. And throughout this season, we've seen Clemson absolutely dominate some football games. They've had some duds as well, but when Clemson's playing their best football, they can definitely hang with just about anyone. It's just a matter of which Clemson team we're going to get, as well as how good this Texas team really is. Now, coming off their second loss to Georgia in the SEC title, they've lost a fair amount of juice in terms of being a title favorite. Still, though, this team has had an incredible year, and mostly due to an elite defense, giving up a ridiculous 143 passing yards a game and just 5.1 yards per attempt, which both lead the nation. But to add on to that, the run D's been dominant as well. Just 107 yards a game and 3.1 per carry in that department. Texas has a strength of schedule sitting the second highest in the college football playoffs. So to me, I don't really see this Clemson offense finding too much success against this group, largely because I just know they're not as good as Georgia. And seeing as well as Clemson's defense does not stack up well at all, Texas's offense could finally get out of their recent funk. I think Texas does take this game somewhat comfortably, but I don't really trust the Horns enough to be a true blowout. I'm going to go with a 27-17 final score for Texas. Maybe the most anticipated game of round 1 is the 8-9 game with Ohio State and Tennessee under the lights in Columbus. Ohio State will look to put maybe the most embarrassing loss in quite some time to Michigan behind them, and they'll get a team built pretty similarly in the Vols. a run-heavy offense with an even better back in Dylan Sampson, and an incredible defensive unit headlined by the defensive line. Seeing how the Buckeyes handle the Michigan defense without Will Johnson, a lot of people think Tennessee can produce similar results against the run and in the pass rush. If that's going to be the recipe for the Vols to pull off this upset, I do think they have the more capable quarterback in this game between Nico and Will Howard, but the gap in level of play this season really has not been that large, so the team who wins in the trenches could definitely control the outcome of this game. Both teams average the exact same yards per carry as well as yards per carry allowed, and are nearly identical in strength of schedule in comparison, but Tennessee does have an offensive line advantage in this game to me. They're going to need to really dominate that battle the same way Michigan did to have a shot at coming away with the win. I just don't think the Buckeyes will be as reliant on the run this time out, and as a team, Ohio State flat out does not allow touchdowns and are incredibly tough to keep out of the end zone when they get to the red zone. Offensively, they've scored 6 on 38 of 49 total red zone attempts, and as a defense, they've allowed just 10 touchdowns and 29 tries, the best mark in the entire country. So with the revenge factor of putting the Michigan loss behind them, as well as the home field advantage, I think Ohio State does get the stops they need, similar to that Michigan game, but this time the offensive game plan allows for a bit more success against a similar opponent, and the Buckeyes escape a great fight from the Vols in Columbus. I'm going with a 24-20 final. The first quarterfinal will be Boise State against the winner of SMU and Penn State, and I'm going to talk about this game as if they're playing Penn State, as that's my pick, but I'll mainly go over Boise State as a team and how they stack up here. Obviously, we all know how talented Ashton Jeanty is, one of the best seasons a running back has had in college football history, and he's capable of putting the Broncos on his back and carrying them to wins. We saw that in the Oregon game where he nearly pulled off that upset with a 200-yard day, and although it was one of the first games, Maddox Madsen was pretty ineffective against that Oregon defense, something I expect to happen again here with the gap between the Broncos' pass offense and Penn State's pass defense. I think this is a game where Drew Aller and Penn State should be able to find a decent rhythm with their playmakers like Tyler Warren. Boise's defense just isn't strong enough to shut this team down. They've got worse defensive numbers across the board with a strength of schedule sitting 79th in the country. And while I do see Jeanty getting his in this game, Penn State's run defense should be solid enough to avoid several big plays from happening, which will end up being the big factor and moving on to the semifinal. And I think Penn State's going to take this one 31-21. 2025 kicks off with the Peach Bowl quarterfinal between Arizona State and the Clemson Texas winner. And in this case, I've got Texas as a matchup here. And listen, I absolutely love Cam Scatterbo, but this definitely could be a really tough game for the Sun Devils. Texas has looked the part of a truly elite team all year besides the two Georgia matchups, and they've got the defensive blueprint to shut down the ASU offense in a way nobody else really has to this point. Again, the pass defense is the best in the country, and they've got the numbers against the run that pop as well. I just don't think the Sun Devil team has the guys up front to be able to move Texas's D-line in a similar way as Georgia has. And Scatterbo is going to have to take over this game without a ton of help. Guys just aren't going to be able to create much separation in the passing game against this Longhorn secondary, and points are going to be a bit hard to come by. As for Texas, Arizona State's defense is decent, but they've given up points to lesser offenses that have not done a great job as a red zone defense this season, despite playing a schedule that's the third easiest in the playoffs. I think this is a game where the talent isn't quite as even as it needs to be, and Texas just wears down Arizona State throughout this game and takes it by 2 scores. I like the Horns here, 34-20. Next is the Rose Bowl quarterfinal, and I've got number 1 Oregon taking on 8-seed Ohio State in a rematch of one of the best games of the regular season. Oregon took the first game in Autzen by a point after a late blunder by the Buckeyes cost them a chance at a game-winning field goal. But heading into this game, it's a bit different of a matchup. That Ohio State O-line has lost some key players, and Oregon went on an absolute tear after that win besides that Wisconsin scare. And as a statistical matchup, these offenses couldn't look much similar. Oregon's got slightly better total statistics, but on a per-play basis, they're separated by 1/10 of a yard in all of overall yards, rush offense, and pass defense, with the only edge going to Ohio State's defense being much better against the run. But they also didn't have to face Ashton Jeanty this season, which certainly inflates that total for Oregon just a bit. If Ohio State is able to get by Tennessee, I think there's a chance this could end up being the best game of the college football playoffs. The amount of NFL talent that will be on display at an iconic stadium like the Rose Bowl will be a treat to watch. But like I mentioned, trench play is so important in big games like this. We saw that last year with Michigan, and I think Oregon has some of the best lines in all of college football, while being able to match the star power all over the field. I'm going to take Oregon to take down Ohio State for a second time this season because of their ability to rush the passer and keep their own quarterback upright, but in an electric finish decided by a field goal, 27-24. The final quarterfinal matchup is the Sugar Bowl in New Orleans, where number 2 Georgia will host the winner of the Notre Dame-Indiana matchup, where I took Notre Dame to advance in round 1. Georgia is one of the hardest teams to read coming into the playoffs because of one major injury. Carson Beck is pretty likely out for the college football playoffs, and the Bulldogs will turn to Gunnar Stockton at quarterback. But despite that news, a lot of people still back the Dogs as potential champions, and I completely understand it. Beck did not have a great year this season, and this Georgia team has all the talent in the world. They've got an offense that's improved throughout the year with guys like Etienne, Frazier, Delp, and Arian Smith coming along. and an offensive line that can absolutely maul the line of scrimmage, and one of the best defenses in the entire country, in my opinion, considering their strength of schedule. They've shut down Texas twice and handled both Tennessee and Clemson as well, which makes that Georgia Tech game look like a bit of an outlier. I think their playoff run is simply going to come down to how effective can Gunnar Stockton be. If he allows for an offensive balance and Georgia doesn't have to rely on the run all game, the defense can take them all the way, but any poor decision making and missed opportunities, and it could end quickly for the Dogs. This Notre Dame offense is one of the best in the nation on the ground, and they're going to challenge that front seven no matter how good they've been. And Stockton is not going to have an easy time against the Irish defense whatsoever, so I'd expect a short game to be utilized a lot. For me, I just think that Georgia has more than enough of a track record to win a game like this. Kirby Smart in the playoffs is incredible, and this team has been battle tested this year and really believes in Stockton. So I'll roll with the Dogs to move on to the semifinal here, 24-17. Semifinal number 1 is Thursday, January 9th with the Orange Bowl in Miami, and I've got 2-seed Georgia taking on 6-seed Penn State here. I just got done talking about how important Gunnar Stockton being able to create a balanced offense for the Dogs is going to be with the last game, but even more so here. Penn State's run defense is just stronger than Notre Dame's, and they can definitely make things tougher on Georgia if Stockton isn't delivering through the air. But a major point can be made with the fact that Georgia's offensive line allowed for both Etienne and Frazier to have great days against the Texas defense, which ranks even better in yards per carry allowed than this Penn State group. So the same situation could occur here regardless, and Stockton was able to put together a couple nice drives through the air against the nation's #1 pass defense on top of that. That is a big reason why I believe in this Georgia team still, despite losing their QB1. And I just think they have the pieces to be able to slow down Penn State superstars like Abdul Carter that can change games in the blink of an eye. On the other side of the ball, Drew Aller is going to be tested in a similar way to that Ohio State game earlier in the year. Georgia's got a stronger pass rush than the Buckeyes to me, and a defense that has seen some of the best offenses in the country. Penn State has routinely lost games in this scenario under James Franklin, and I just don't trust Penn State when it comes to this type of game. I think their defense does keep them in it until the end, but Georgia advances to the national title game this year with another low-scoring win, 23-20. Now over to the other semifinal, the Cotton Bowl from AT&T Stadium in Arlington, Texas. My matchup here is an absolute beauty with #1 Oregon and #5 Texas. A game I really hope we get to see this playoff. I think Texas just stacks up slightly better against Oregon's defense compared to Georgia's, which has been their only losses this year. But at the same time, the Ducks' offense would be without a doubt the best they've seen all season long. They've got elite weapons around an elite quarterback and an offensive line that's been even better than Georgia's. The key to this game to me is how effective Dillon Gabriel can be against that secondary. Nobody's really found any rhythm against the Longhorns throughout the air all year, but nobody they've faced all year has the talent and weapons at Dillon Gabriel's disposal. If this is the matchup, I think this is the first time we see Texas defense get truly tested through the air, and the Ducks will hold a late lead in a back and forth game. And whether they have the ball with a chance to put the game away, or they're the ones on defense looking for a final stop, I think Oregon's got enough firepower to take this game and advance to the national title game. I'm going with a 31-27 final for the Ducks, setting up an elite title matchup with Georgia. Monday, January 20th brings us a 2025 College Football Playoff National Championship, and with so many incredible matchup options at our disposal, my bracket ends up with the #1 and #2 overall seeds going head-to-head in Atlanta. Georgia would obviously have a bit of an advantage playing in their home state and a very familiar site, but Oregon would absolutely travel to this game and make that crowd as 50-50 as possible. What a coaching matchup this would be. Dan Lanning and Kirby Smart may be the two best coaches in college football right now. I definitely agree that Oregon has the toughest path to a national title this season, which is definitely unfair for being the #1 overall seed. But as they've proved all season to me, I think they can handle this throughout their talent and preparation. And there really hasn't been any better team all year long than the Ducks, and they've got the recipe to bring home a national championship. I think this matchup will look somewhat similar to the two Oregon matchups I have in previous rounds with Ohio State and Texas. This has been the top 4 teams for the majority of the season, and I think all of them have proven to be fairly even in terms of talent. But again, the gap between quarterbacks here is just huge for me. Dillon Gabriel is going to be able to find success against this Georgia secondary, and they've got an offensive line that can stave off one of the nation's best defensive line units enough to keep the chains moving throughout this game. I just don't think Georgia's offense is going to be able to outpace Oregon here, and they're going to have to rely on the defense causing yet another low-scoring final if they want to be national champions. I just don't think the Ducks allow that to happen here, and Oregon captures their first ever national championship as a program, 30-24 over Georgia. That's it for my playoff picks. Let me know your thoughts and predictions down in the comments below for any potential matchups in this playoff, as well as any content you'd like to see on the channel in the future. As always, thanks for watching. Feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.